is the Rangers Journal Night.
Well, hello everybody and welcome back to your Rangers Journal podcast. My name's Scotty, I'm your host and I'm delighted to be joined on a panel tonight who are going to help me talk about Leeds and Rangers and the potential benefits of a relationship. We'll look at what the 49ers done when they went into Leeds, any errors that they've potentially made, then we'll look at maybe a couple of players that could go either way. Joining me to do that, first up we've got Tam. Tam, how are you, mate?
Not too bad. Absolutely roasting the night. It is about 25 degrees here and I'm sweating doing this.
Aye, it's cooking, innit? It's cooking. Billy, no shirt tonight, how are you, pal?
No. After getting told I was wearing an old Eggman shirt last time, I'm playing it safe, something nice and dull. I'm good. Actually, I'm off in my hollybobs tomorrow, and I'm heading to the Costa del Sol. So I'm glad to hear it in the mid-20s because that's where I'll be tomorrow.
Aye, good stuff, mate. How long are you away for?
A week back seeing the family and everything, so it's looking good actually. A few nice things lined up, and you know what it's like when you come back from a week visiting the family. You need a holiday after it, so yeah, should be good.
Okay, I know. Good stuff. And the man behind the stats, Doug, how you doing, pal?
I'm not bad, thanks. I'd like to go on record and say I really liked Billy's shirt, so I thought the grief was totally unfounded.
Excellent, thank you. I can probably send you. I'll never be able to wear it again after.
Hello to everybody in the comments. I hope you're well. Just a good evening to everybody. If anybody's got any questions about what we think about this, now I'm not saying that we know that Rangers and Leeds are going to do this together, they're going to do that together. This is purely our thoughts on what could happen with the takeover and the potential relationship between the clubs going forward. So, Doug, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think about the whole situation? Do you think we done a pod a couple of weeks ago on a multi-club model? Do you think that's the kind of relationship we're looking at here, or do you think this is just going to be sharing some stuff without actually transferring players?
Well, I mean, I do think transferring is a potential possibility, but I don't think we're looking at a multi-club model. The guys have been particularly vocal on that from the Leeds side of things. Obviously, I think if you've been a Leeds supporter over the last couple of weeks, as much as we've been excited, you know, they've been looking at this going, oh, you know, is this their new toy? Are we going to get forgotten? You know, kind of thing. And they've gone at pains to say to the Leeds fans, no, that's not the case. They're separate things. We're an investment group. We invest in things and we want all of our investments to do the best that they possibly can. A multi-club model is a much closer knit thing in terms of the way the business is set up. These, are totally separate football clubs still. But that being said, there will obviously be areas that they will look to get benefit from. Parag McGrath is obviously, he's the chairman of Leeds. He's the vice chairman of Rangers. There's obvious overlap there. I believe he's also on one of the main people in the board of the San Francisco 49ers as well. So there's plenty of overlap there, and I think the likeliest, and we'll see this in one of the slides, I've kind of put things into kind of likely, less likely, things like that. I think the most likely things that we'll see are more behind the scenes kind of things. So stuff like using, they can share the same analytics and scouting databases and stuff like that. You don't need to have two sets of the one thing when you can just share that about, because there will be, overlapping between things like scouting, Rangers and Leeds, in terms of if you kind of put us, as a top end of the SPL, and Leeds looking to be probably, aiming to, at the beginning at least, get settled in the Premiership and then getting kind of into the mid-table. They're kind of similar level-wise in some kind of ways in terms of the type of players, the level of players you're likely to get. So there's going to be overlap there. And then, we've already started seeing rumours about players going both ways. And I do think that is a realistic and sensible thing for them to do as well. We can offer European football to Leeds players who can show what they can do at that level to then go and progress to Leeds, and vice versa. Players that come at Rangers often will have an eye on getting to the Premiership, and so there's a route there for them to do that by going to Leeds.
Tam, I'm going to come to you next. See, now, Doug brings up a very good point there about sharing kind of scouting stuff and analytical data. Now, I'm just going to put it bluntly now. Would it be as simple as that Leeds and Rangers just have the one big database that they can just pluck players from?
It probably could be, but I think there'll have to be something that will need to be worked out. Whether if it is the one database, players are going to have to, both teams are going to have to think who's getting first dibs on what player, because it could end up in a bidding war between the two clubs. So I think there needs to be something worked out there. Definitely think sharing data and stuff will be key, but if we are fighting against Leeds for the same player, it's probably not going to go well. So it needs to either be we get first dibs, they can play European football, and then whoever we don't want, they can go to Leeds and play in the Premier League if they want.
Do you think they'll be able to design a pathway where they say to players, take a young Glenn Kamara, for example, right, playing in France. Now this is a complete theory, it's a made up player, right? Young Glenn Kamara playing in France, he's not quite at Leeds level yet, but send him to Scotland, it makes an instant impact for Rangers, and then further down the line, so it's like a chain. Is that something you could see working?
I think it's something I could see happening both ways.
Right, okay.
A bit like what you're sort of describing is like a feeder club sort of thing. You get...
Aye, both ways, aye.
Aye. So Leeds, let's say, sign 20 young boys, and they say, look, half of yous aren't ready, we're going to send yous up the road to Scotland, play season or two, then we'll take you back, you'll go straight into our first team. I'd like to see that happen because it could maybe open up different markets for ourselves as well. Obviously it would be good to give the young boys experience, but there needs to be some sort of money gain as well there, because we can't just be developing their players for nothing.
Aye, definitely. Billy, what's your thoughts on all that in terms of sharing data? I think I've put the question across wrong. I wasn't meaning it to be like a kind of a feeder club idea. I know I used the word chain, but do you think that Rangers and Leeds having the kind of same scouting database where they can level players out, they can mark progress for certain players and then utilise what club would be best for them, do you think that's something that could work?
I mean, it could work. I think there's a danger of kind of overstating how big a thing that will be. I think what Tam was saying is right. I think that actually having the economies of scale on the analytics and the database and the network of people, because everything's analytics now, so you can get any start on any player, and that's good because, you know, obviously we're going to have access to a network that's EPL level. It's entirely possible there'll be a bit of back and forth between Rangers and Leeds, and I understand Pragmarati saying, you know, like we'll only look at each club individually, and you know they're not going to use the term feeder club because that would get Rangers fans, like, understandably get their ire up. So they're not going to say that, and I don't think it's like. There's a danger here that if we get into too tight a relationship or expect to get into too tight a relationship with Leeds, that you're actually limiting things. Yes, there's a line you can sell certain players where you say, look, here's what we think would work. We will bounce you up to Scotland for a year or two, and we think that'll toughen you up. You can come down to the EPL, and that's, you know, understandably there are players that will fall into that category. But I think we also have to be careful. You know, we're talking about like Nico Raskin maybe like going down south and been off to Leeds. Well, fine if Leeds offer us the most money for Nico Raskin. Otherwise, you know, I'm hearing like 15 million, and to me that's a bit on the low side for where Raskin's at just now. You're given what he did coming on for Belgium, and you know even the manager's talking him up, saying he was instrumental in settling things down. You know, like adding a bit of bite to midfield and turning what was looking like a sketchy drawing back into a win. So I'd be looking at 20 million plus for Raskin, and that's where there's a lot of clubs in the world apart from Leeds, so like I can see it being good for development. And in terms of sales, yeah, potentially, but I'd be a wee bit wary if we started having too many of our assets turning up at Leeds, and I doubt Pragmarati seems too smart for that. If Leeds are willing to pay 15 million and someone else like Nico Raskin always wanted to go to Chelsea. I don't think he's heading there anytime soon yet. But if they wanted to pay 25 million, that's where he goes. I think there's definitely the potential to have players have a path. But I think also like taps into a bit what Tam was saying. If you're a player looking at it, we're going to get the younger, less developed players because the more polished player, as it stands, Leeds are in the richest league in the world. If you're a player looking at Leeds or Rangers, unless you've got some other reason, like you want to be developed, you want to sort of toughen up a bit, like Malik Tillman or something like that, you're going to look at Leeds and Rangers and go, I want in the EPL. So I think we have to be realistic about what we might get, although it is nice to think of players coming from Leeds to Rangers for a year or two. Interesting to see what the story is, because that we'd need to know it was a young player coming in to develop, rather than getting their sort of cast off. So I'm kind of like, I'm a wee bit waiting to see what happens, because Pragmarati's making all the right noises, but he's a super smart guy. I've watched business sort of conference interviews with him. He knows how to make us feel good the same way he knows how to make Leeds fans feel good. And if he makes us feel good by winning things and bringing in players that we're selling on, brilliant. But I'll wait and see how it operates. But all the things we've talked about are possible. I've just the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. So let's see. That's gonna. I think we're all slavering to start getting some signings in.
That's fair dues, Billy.
Can I add a little bit?
Of course, Doug, on you go.
I think Billy's absolutely right that you don't want them to get too close, and I don't think that we will, because ultimately the goals of both clubs are totally different. Leeds are coming into a league from the bottom and building from there, and we are at the top end of the league and looking to put ourselves in at the top. And there's a lot of things that won't overline. So as I said, there can be a little bit of movement. I don't think we'll ever get too super close in those types of ways, simply because the goals are different. The things the clubs offer are different. We will offer ideally regular Champions League football to players. That's something that they won't be getting at Leeds in the sort of the near future anyway, potentially. Obviously in the further future. And Champions League football is something that, even money aside, could swing a player. Even if they were looking at between like Leeds and Rangers, although I don't think you'll see that much that often. But I think that in and of itself prevents that, what Billy's saying about prevents us from merging too much. Isn't it just that the goals of the clubs are not the same, and so the overlaps will be different, and the priorities will be different. The one thing I would say about the Leeds and buying players is, what I'd like to see them do is use Leeds to nudge other teams up and to create bidding wars. If we've got only one team interested and we want to nudge them up a little bit, maybe Leeds come in and offer an extra million or two, and so that other club are going, well, actually, no, we want this guy. And maybe that's too obvious a play, but I would like to think that those are the kind of smart things that they'll do.
Doug, I want to come back to you on, obviously, just a quick thank you to the guys in the comments for telling me about the echo I was having. I try to bring back a set of headphones tonight and it's just not happening, so they'll be going in the bin. Anyway, Doug, I want to come back to you. Is the fact that Parag Marathi was appointed vice chairman of Rangers the direct link between the two clubs now, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the obvious one. I think first and foremost, I don't think he could have been made the chairman, as that would potentially have brought us into the issues with the same ownerships and decision makings between two clubs. It's not impossible for Leeds to get into Europe, by winning a cup competition or something. So we could still say potentially both end up in the Europa League or something like that. So that's something that they do need to take into consideration. But yeah, as I say, he's the obvious, he's one of the main players, one of the main decision makers. And so the fact that he's, in the prime and second prime position in both clubs is the obvious overlap. He's going to know the exact ins and outs and happenings of both clubs, and he'll be probably the one that is overseeing from that point of view in terms of where the connections will be, he'll be the one that will be making those decisions, because, as I say, I think it'll come from the background that a lot of these things will happen. We might never see a lot of the actual work that happens between the two clubs, because it will be in the background, sort of run from him. They're not people, from what I've read and from what I've seen, they're not people that come out and tell you every bit of detail. They'll tell us stuff when we need to know, or when they think it's prudent to tell us. We've already seen them take moves that will lessen certain types of communications by changing us. In terms of the business type, they won't have to have AGMs. They won't have to disclose the exact divisions of ownership and things like that moving forward. So I think, information will be quite tight knit, and so we may actually never see, as I say, a lot of the things that actually happens between the two clubs in terms of a business sense.
Doug, just quickly there, when you were saying about both the teams ending up in the Europa League, would that be an issue for us due to both of our clubs being owned by the 49ers enterprise? Or is it just that if Parag was both chairmans, then there would be an issue?
I don't believe so, because as I say, I don't know exactly how Leeds are set up, but obviously we're set up. The 49ers are part of the consortium. We refer to them as that. We refer to everything as the 49ers because they're the kind of headline. But the entity that's actually bought the club, I think it's called like Rangers PLCC or something like that, which is made up of the 49ers, Kavanagh, and a few other investors. So it's not actually the 49ers enterprises that own Rangers or the majority stakeholders. It's this entity of which the 49ers are a part. I believe, and I'm happy to be corrected in this because I've not actually looked into it greatly. I believe it's a similar setup at Leeds, with the 49ers as a majority. But it might be that the 49ers enterprises themselves bought Leeds. I'm not 100%, but that's one of the reasons that he is the vice chairman, though, because again, it just provides a little step away because he's the main man at Leeds. So not make him the main man here. But as far as I'm aware, the way that everything's set up, it shouldn't be an issue.
Doug, can you take the hosting chair for 5 minutes? I need to restart.
Yeah, no bother.
Just go through it. Cheers.
So Scotty's thrown up this first slide then. Put some stuff together just on initially the kind of general direction that the 49ers have taken with Leeds and will probably look to take with us, before going into more detail about what they've done with Leeds. Some of the stuff we've talked about before, so we've got like they're very data driven. America is kind of the birthplace of that, in terms of the real data driven models from baseball in particular, and it's a big thing that they do. They work with data and heavily emphasised on their analytics, the technology they use as part of their decision making. They'll draw from their experience in the NFL, obviously with the 49ers, and that'll play a key role in things like performance, their in-game strategy, and the one that I think will hopefully have the biggest influence, health, in terms of player recovery and individual plans and things like that. I think that's a real big one. Second one there, focus on our commercial approach. I don't think we are anywhere near our height of our powers commercially. We had a quite good spot. One of the few things that his name has totally escaped me, our former chairman, former CEO, when he was the commercial director, he actually did quite well in terms of getting quite a few commercial deals in quite quickly.
Bisgrove, yeah.
Bisgrove, that's that. Thank you very much. I thought he was a good commercial director. He wasn't such a good CEO, but during his time as commercial director, we seemed to be announcing new connections every other day, which was kind of good. Man United are the kings of that. Man United have got a sponsor for everything you could think of: tires, underwear, boxing, gloves. They've got something for everything. And I want us to push a little bit more in that direction. I think this will be something that they'll be able to do on a global scale. They're big on their fan engagement. We'll touch on some things that they've done with Leeds in terms of that. That is with a slight, if you want to be cynical about it, there is a slight angle to that because they're big on fan engagement because the engaged fans spend more money. And so they'll look to try and lever that and get fans in the stadium early, make things interesting. We've done little bits of that so far, but I think they'll be able to push that much further. And then the last part, they're sort of long-term strategic investment. They're not short-term owners. They have shown in previous investments that they are in for the long haul, that they will push to make the investments last, to grow the infrastructure, and as they said in their statement, obviously make the club self-sustaining. So I am encouraged by that. I do think they seem to have a good record. So if I just throw it over to you, Tam, first of all, is there anything in there that you're particularly excited about or interested in terms of what they might have done with Leeds and what that could mean for us?
Well, what you said in the start about the health sort of side of it with player recovery and stuff, I know that Russell Martin likes his players to be fit, and he won't play them if they're not at a good fitness level, because you need a good fitness level for the football he wants to play. So that really does excite me. The fan engagement stuff, it's a difficult one. It's good that they're trying to engage us, but again, is it just a money issue and all they're trying to do is get us to spend more? I hope it's not that, but more than likely it unfortunately will be. The sponsorship sort of deals, I like the idea of that. I wouldn't mind us being like a Man United, having a sponsor for absolutely everything. But we need to get the right sponsors in, because a couple of the deals we've had before, one turned out not to even be a company. So we just need to make sure that we're doing absolutely everything right.
Absolutely. Just before I bring you in, Billy, I've got a question here from Paul. Do you think we'll get to know the value of our new shirt sponsorship deal? I think we'll get less of that kind of information moving forward, Paul, because I do think, as I said before, they are a bit tighter with their information. The 49ers, they're, unless it's something that they can use as a marketing thing, so like this is the biggest deal in the club's history, we'll probably get taglines like that. I don't know if we'll necessarily get pound figures and leaks of pound figures in the way that we have done in the past. I think they'll be a lot tighter with their information, but we shall see as it goes on. Billy, what about you? Is there anything in particular that you're excited about from that kind of list of things?
I mean, excited would be overstating it, because we get excited with goals and stuff. You start talking about long-term corporate talk. It's necessary, but not that exciting. Just to mention though, actually, Doug, you were bang on about the ownership model, because I think Leeds are 100% owned by the 49ers, and I think they have been since 2023, whereas we're 51% owned by a consortium headed up by Kavanagh with the 49ers. I think, if I remember right, I think that's how they avoid any sort of conflict about potential, European competitions. And guys as smart as this are not going to stumble over something like that.
Yep.
On the data-driven thing, I'm kind of on the fence in this. I'm kind of potentially quite excited about it, but also I wonder how. I think we may be in for a slightly bumpy ride, because we're used to being a support who, there's the old joke about you're only as good as your last pass at Rangers, and I know that's kind of part of the pressure that drives us on to be successful. It also can result in pressure on players and managers. And I thought it was something kind of interesting. They were talking about in one of the BBC programmes about Thomas Frank off to Spurs, and how when he'd been at Brentford, I think he'd lost 8 of his first 10 games. And a lot of clubs, he would have been under quite a bit of pressure, but Brentford actually were looking at the underlying data, and they were like, no, the data is good. Like how the team's playing is good. Statistically, we are going to come good. And I think as football fans, intuitively, we rail against that. We all kind of do the eye test, and if we're not winning, if we're not scoring, like, okay, if we're making chances, you feel okay for 2 or 3 games, but then that starts to wear thin. So I think we might be in for an interesting period, because you think about, I think of a couple of examples, like Aberdeen last season. Like Aberdeen last season had that run in the first half. And I remember listening to rabid Aberdeen fan and podcaster JJ Bull talk. He's a bit of a stato as well. And he was talking about, he wasn't actually that optimistic about Aberdeen finishing second or third. Well, certainly not second, because basically what he said is, they're outperforming that they're scoring way more than they should and they're conceding way less than they should, and that will right itself. And boy, did it ever for the second half of the season. It's like you really saw the thing even out in a kind of quite a sort of lopsided way. So stuff like that, I think we're going to have to get used to. And there's I think it's a guy called Joe who's at the Saints, the Stat Saint or the Saints Stat, the kind of like Southampton podcaster. He was talking about the fact that Russell Martin teams take a while to get going. And that's where I think it'll be interesting, because if he's right about, Russell Martin teams will eventually play well, but we might be out of the Champions League and kind of, have dropped points in the league by the time we start motoring. That'll be interesting, because the 49ers might well be looking at data, but we're not used to thinking that way. And as fans, you're not really wired that way. If the team, especially, Russell Martin is at best a divisive appointment, even though some of us have warmed up a wee bit, it wouldn't be a stretch to see him having a bumpy start and the fans feeling one thing. And it'll be interesting in that situation to see how this sort of analytics and the underlying data is applied, because I'm just not sure that that's really been done at Rangers the way it should have in the past. Interesting to see how it actually taps it. We're talking about keeping players healthy. That will be interesting. It was funny though, like Tam was saying about like Russell Martin doesn't play his players unless they're fit, and I was like, that reminds me of a Belgian guy who used to be knocking about like Ibrox, and we were all kind of wanting them slung out for not playing players. So it's kind of funny how you can be glass half full or glass half empty about that. I've got a bit of a pet theory about why our players keep getting injured, and I think I'm not saying it's the only thing, but I wonder if it is just that thing of teams play Rangers and they do lift their game, and they're allowed to kick us in a way they're not allowed to kick Celtic players. All the stats show that. So I wonder if players are just pushed into the red a lot more playing for Rangers. I'm not saying that that's the be all and end all, but we've had so many managers, so many coaches, they all come in with, like Bale and Clement come in with all these great plans to stop the injury list, and it never seems to happen, which starts to make me wonder, is it something to do with maybe the nature of Scottish football? It's a very physical game, and there's the old story about when Souness came in, and he was wanting to sign some player from an opposition team because he played out of his skin against Rangers, and Walter Smith went, yeah, cool your jets, watch him next week. And of course, the next week he's playing like another SPL team and was anonymous. And I think there is an element of teams get really up for playing us, and it might be more a case of squad depth is maybe the way to go, rather than expecting miracles about data helping us keep players fit. So, the data will be interesting. It will, because that's where I feel we need to make leaps to try and to try and pull Celtic back. I don't think they're that far ahead, but this is one of the things where we could steal a march on them. And it would be nice to see us, bringing players in and getting a style of play where they're actually thinking at a longer term level. The problem is with Rangers, you don't get to go 6 points behind by the time the first Old Firm game comes along and then start talking about data, because the fans will switch off to that, I think. I could jump into the commercial stuff. I'll say lightly on the commercial stuff, because it may give someone else a chance to speak. Is that I think Tam's right. I think fan engagement is going to be about making money, but I think we're all big enough to know that that's kind of how it works. Like dear Lord, the amount of 55 stuff that me and my brother and every other Rangers fan bought. We've got 55 bottles of whiskey and 55 T-shirts and all sorts. If we're successful, they'll get money out of us, because Rangers fans buy stuff like nobody else. We buy stuff when we're not successful, and when we are successful, because of this built-up pent up demand for like 55 whatever. Well, when 56 comes along, they won't have trouble shifting units if we're successful. So yeah, I think the last thing I'll say in the fan engagement, I think the Rangers media team have got better over the last 3 or 4 years. I think they do a very good job with quite limited resources compared to Celtic. It would be nice to see them scale up a bit and see what they could do with a bit more resources. And the other thing I would actually like us to do, as I understand it, that lot across the city have got quite a big media team, and a lot of them are dedicated to managing the press, to snuffing out stories they don't like, to planting stories, to planting stories to distract things when other bad things are happening at Celtic. I'd like us to be a wee bit more on the front foot. I'd love to see the 49ers come in and actually appoint a couple of people and go, your job is to go and look after the press and to make trouble for people that make trouble for us. Because I don't think we've had the money to do that. And hopefully now with the 49ers coming in, they'll be savvy enough to beef up the media team.
That's a really good point, actually. Something. Yeah, on you go.
Just quickly to touch on something Billy said. I think the guy you're thinking about, the stats guy, John Walker, somebody I talked to.
It's stats. He's called the Saint Stat Joe, I thought was his name.
Oh, I think John probably does around the sort of same. He does say that Russell Martin's teams do take a wee while to go. I was on somewhere else last night saying that I think it will be September, October before we even see anything out of this Rangers team.
That sounds very Clement-esque.
Yeah.
I think it's true though.
I know I've got a holiday like him, but I'm not.
I think that's true of any new manager. To be fair, you're always going to have a bit of a period of improvement as they put their ideas in. I think that's a really good point there, Billy, about the media stuff. That's not something I've personally really thought about previously, which is really good. But I think the real question from that piece there, Billy, is did you get 55 bottles of whiskey or 55 bottles of whiskey?
I know. I get 2 bottles. I get 2 bottles of whiskey. My brother and I just kept buying each other gifts. So he bought me a commemorative top. I bought him a 55 bottle of whiskey, and that way we kind of justified it to our wives. It's like, well, we're kind of buying presents for my brother. What are you going to do? Whereas if you'd just been buying it all for yourself, it might have looked slightly different. But still not too open. The 55 bottle of whiskey is still sitting untapped. So not sure when that will be getting opened, but 56 would be tempting.
Absolutely. Got a quick question here from saying, does FFP apply in Scotland? The SFA don't apply an individual sort of FFP system like England does, but local football associations are responsible for overseeing UEFA level FFP, which does apply to us for European competition. So we do have to adhere to sort of it on a European level, but there's not like an individual one for Scotland, the way that England have certain FFP rules for their league as well. So it's I'll sort of say a bit like that. I hope that answers that question for you. Okay, so we'll push on to the next bit. I'll come to you, Scotty, for this as you've joined us again. We've got a couple of slides on the sort of the progress that they have made with Leeds, the 49ers thus far. And the first slide here kind of focuses on the stadium and sort of match day. So this is something that has been touched on with us. Obviously, I think most people agree that we want to see Ibrox get certainly some improvements and modernisation, but also increase the capacity, as we've apparently got sort of around about 18,000, I think it is, potential season tickets there, and that's money that I'm sure the 49ers would love to add to our coffers. They have taken action in Leeds to improve their stadium. They're sitting with around about 37,500 as their capacity, and they're looking to increase that to 53,000. Which, to put that in perspective for folk, is just shy, I believe, of the Man City's ground. I think they're about 53.5 thereabouts, and looking to make it a UEFA elite level stadium. If they do complete that, it will become England's 7th largest club ground, and they have made starts to this. So they've got the council back in their proposals. And they've started plans and released plans on increasing, I believe, 2 of this out of the 4 stands, which involves buying some land from the council. But the bit in the middle there that I quite like, and I think is a positive thing, and I'll get you to reflect on this, Scotty. The bit I like is the Leeds fans are precious about the environment and the atmosphere within Ellen Road, which I think is something that you would say would be true of Rangers fans about Ibrox. And one of the things the 49ers have done is they've specifically hired acoustic consultants to look at their plans and provide feedback to try and help make sure that the atmosphere is preserved and it doesn't get lost and become like kind of the soulless bowls that I think some clubs have ended up with.
Doug, only you could know that Leeds have hired acoustic consultants to test the
It's on their website. It's on their website.
That's impressive. That's impressive. But no, being serious, looking at so when Leeds get relegated to the Championship, their squad was far, far too good to be relegated at the time. They were able to sell countless players. They loaned a good few players as well. Trimmed the wage bill, missed out in promotion, and then they've done it again. So every year, that if they didn't get promotion this year, the quality was going to get less and less. The quality was getting thinned in the team every year, even though they were still spending decent sums of money. They implemented this player trading model now. The 49ers and Andrew Cavan have come into Rangers, and we're not in that position where we've got a Gio Ruta, Dan James, players like this kicking about, Brendan Aronson. Any one of them three players would walk into his Rangers team and make a big difference. I know that for a fact because I've watched plenty of Leeds. So, in terms of making changes to Ibrox, that's not going to happen yet, in my opinion. I think that's going to come at a later date. I think you'll maybe start seeing subtle differences in the background in terms of maybe a change in music, maybe a change of atmosphere, going in a different direction in that sense. But in terms of submitting plans to expand the stadium, we posted a loss of £17.2 million last year. We need to become sustainable first. Win leagues, get any Champions League. And the only way to do that is to have a good enough squad that can beat Celtic and all the rest of the jobbers in the league and win the league every season. So that's what's so good about this takeover, is that for it to be successful, the 49ers haven't just got to get us promoted or keep us in a division. They've got to win us that league every single season or ensure Champions League football every single season to make it sustainable, to get a good player trading model in place, bring us the best data analytics and the best scouting system that you could possibly get in terms of modernisation. Need to upgrade the medical department. So there's an awful lot of things that can get done in the background, but I think the 49ers' immediate priority should be the squad on the pitch. The men's squad on the pitch. The women's team's fine, they're competing. We're not. We are, beating Celtic 2 or 3-0 at Ibrox and then going and getting pumped off St Mirren the following week. So we need to get the fitba right on the park first, with some subtle changes in the background that we shouldn't know about. If you've got a good board, if the board's doing a good job, then nobody ever talks about the board because, you're winning on the pitch. That's all you really care about. And that's where we've been going wrong the last kind of couple of years. Hopefully our TV will be upgraded. I don't know. You might see some subtle changes in the background. Hopefully.
Absolutely. I'll come to you next time. You touched a bit on fan engagement earlier, and one of the things that we've got on that slide there, Scotty talked about using the best analytics and the best data. One of the other things that I think they'll bring is the best technology. We've had issues in the past couple of years with turnstiles, people getting into games late, missing goals. In European games, in our Euro run, we scored quite a lot of early goals. And I know a number of people missed them, getting late into games and things like that. One of the things that they've done at Ellen Road is bring in systems, optimising parking, optimising their kiosks, improving the way that their staff works in combination with each other and crowd flow, and things like that. That from best practices from Levi's to sort of smooth operations, and again, as I said before, increased spending. How important do you think that kind of thing will play into the match day experience if they can improve that at Ibrox?
It will play massively into the match day experience. I don't know how many times I've turned up to Ibrox and I'm thinking, cool, I'm going to scan my ticket, go in, get a pie, walk in. But unfortunately, that's not how it happens. For European games, I've been in queues for about an hour, sometimes half an hour, and then you get to the turnstile and something's gone wrong, or your ticket isn't scanning, if it's the QR codes need to be scrapped completely. I don't know how we scrap that, but it needs to go because it is absolutely a shocking system to use. And then you walk in, you go to the kiosk, you go get your pie. Sorry, pal, kiosks are done. They can't sell you anything just now. So it's just people go to the football for the experience, and if that's shocking, people are going to stop going. So if they want to increase spending, they need to make queuing systems better and just make it easier for fans to get to the stadium. And also, I think a bit with accessibility as well. Some disabled fans not being able to get in or having to wait in queues for much longer, or with searches. That stuff needs to be sort of sorted ASAP because it is just bringing down the matchday experience for everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, a really good point there about like the disabled fans. That was obviously a big part of the most recent update that they made to the stadium. That although it was frustrating for a lot of people, was a really big thing. I do know some fans that have made use of the new enhancements to the stadium and have really liked it. It's made a big difference to them. And more of the same will be welcome. Billy, if I bring you in for the next slide here, we'll start touching on the sort of the football operations. This is something I think we've already seen in terms of a real positive impact to Rangers. Some of the things they did with Leeds, appointed a new senior data analyst, appointed a new academy manager, and new leadership across their youth ranks. Obviously, in the last sort of month, we've seen a new board come in, chairman, director of football, let go of our previous sort of technical director, essentially, and then manager, and all of that was brought in very quick, very ordered, and orderly succession. Have you been impressed by the way that they've sort of operated in that sense in the early days, and is that what you want to see more of going forward?
Yeah, I mean, they're doing all the right things in the right order. And just to jump back briefly to one point, when you're talking about overall improvements, I'd love to see the footprint around Ibrox developed. I think that could be done. Certain things could be done just to spruce up the immediate area, because we know that lot got a lot of help from Glasgow City Council and Commonwealth grants and all sorts that we don't get. But I think the footprint around Ibrox, I'd love to see just a wee bit of sprucing up, because I think Ibrox is, I mean, we kind of, I think we almost take it for granted. It is an absolute jewel in world football. You know, it's a thing of beauty, and I think it should be a jewel and a crown in terms of like the immediate area. So I hope the 49ers are looking at that. It'd be interesting to see what they do with the sellers of unofficial merch and the like. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with that. But to move on to your point about the upgrades, Doug, I think, yeah, they're doing everything in the right order. You know, like everything, you get the impression that these are serious people. They have a plan, and it's not winging it and kind of plugging gaps and, you know, taking a guy who's a good sort of like commercial guy and making him the CEO like we did with Bisgrove. So, you know, what I really like is we're putting people like Thelwell, you know, people who've done the job into the job they're going to do. And it feels like if we get that in place, then when people move on, there's going to be less of a hit, hopefully. The new academy director thing, that'll be really interesting, because there's an argument. I mean, intuitively, as football fans, we feel like we must have a youth team and we must have an academy. I feel that. I feel like as Rangers, you need to have a path to become a Rangers player, and you need to have a youth team and an academy. But in all honesty, when you look at the productivity out of it in terms of actual first team players or assets, I'm kind of older and a bit doddery now, but I'm thinking like Nathan Patterson, Barry Ferguson. Am I missing any massive like assets we've created from the academy? Because, you know, we'll get, you know, like Ross McCausland will come in and then he'll bounce about for a season or two and he'll move on, and you'll get people like Glenn Middleton and people like that had a chance back in the day when really it was a weakened squad, and if you were ever going to give youth a chance, it was then. it just doesn't seem to work. And I know that there's a bigger issue in Scotland of players getting lost at a certain age. I think it's between 18 and 21. Tam might know better than me, but there is an age group in Scotland where players just get to a certain level and are kind of developmentally lost. They just either stagnate or drift out of the game or go down the leagues. This is what I'll be fascinated to see, because the 49ers are going to be hard-nosed businessmen, and how are they going to make money out of this academy? They're either going to want to have an academy that is producing, a right back or a left back every couple of years that we can punt for 10 million, or what's the point in it? That's and it is, looking at our academy and what it's generated under various regimes, you kind of question its raison d'etre to kind of to actually say, I know why it's there. I know what it's supposed to do. Does it do it? You can make an argument that, like, Barry Ferguson is just a freak happenstance. He's just one of those players that kind of, he was going to be a great player. And I think he should be able to produce a Nathan Patterson every few years because the way the modern game is. But I'll be fascinated. I'm really fascinated to see what the 49ers have got lined up, because either they're going to make money out of the academy or they're going to look at it and say, what is the point of that? So, I'd be fascinated to see.
Absolutely. I think the only other young player I can remember that gone for any reasonable amount was Barry Mackay. I think we got almost $1 million for him, or somewhere towards that region. Everything else has been pretty low, so it'll be good to see hopefully more of that in the future.
20 years. We're talking like 20 odd years, and it's like, yeah.
So if I come to you, Scotty, and the talking about the financial commitments, which we'll touch on here, and moving into the next slide as well. At Leeds, they talked about coming in and spending money, that they were going to put in 100 million to them that was across both on-field things and for off-field matters. And Parag Margath made an every last penny pledge where he vowed to reinvest funds into the team, particularly from their Premier League bump, so that they could improve the playing squad and sticking within the FPP limits. So on that kind of point, we've got a slide here looking at, this is just specifically the previous year, where obviously they didn't get into the Premiership in the first chance of asking. So they had to sell, or they went and sold a bunch of players. A lot of their main big players, which initially fans were quite unhappy about. But when you look there, they've obviously, they've got a few big name players. People like Archie Gray went to Tottenham. Obviously, everyone knows Glenn Kamara. He went on to Rennes. And they brought in just under £130 million there. And then they've brought in the list there below. Again, Ramzani is a player that's been linked with us. Ao Tanaka is a really good Japanese player. And those combined to less than 30 million spend. So that's leaving a profit of over £100 million there, which, that's a transfer model working and in action. I know that obviously you're a Leeds fan yourself, so you'll be able to speak to how good some of those replacements were. And I believe some actually think that some of the new guys are better than the original big price sticker guys. Is this exactly what you want to start seeing for Rangers?
Not right now, no. Down the line. Leeds were in a really, really bad way with financial fair play, even when we got relegated, due to the previous ownership, who had invested a lot of money in players that just weren't cutting the mustard, to just say it bluntly. When Jesse Marsh came in, I think he spent something like £100 million, and it was just on it. Like Georgino Rutter gets signed for, what was it, 25 million from Hoffenheim, I think it was, and was playing for a B team. So players weren't mismanaged. It was only when we got into the Championship in the first season, Rutter started playing games and it was absolutely unreal. Therefore, Brighton triggered the minimum fee release clause of 40 million. Archie Gray to Tottenham, £35 million. That was pure profit because he was a youth player. One to watch is Harry Gray. I think that's his brother. He's a centre forward. He's making a breakthrough at Leeds. Somerville, that was a minimum fee. Sinisterra was a minimum fee, and Kamara just wasn't. He was good, Kamara, but I think they were looking for somebody that could do a wee bit more they basically do Glenn Kamara's job, but do more going forward. And in Tanaka, they got that. Tanaka was probably the best signing in the bunch for me. He came in from a German side. I don't know if it was Freiburg or not. It was Dusseldorf. For £3.5 million, and he was outstanding. He scored that many last-minute winners and sneaking into the back post and stuff like that last season to get us promoted. Jayden Bogle, he signed for Sheffield United for £5 million. He was just an out-and-out right back that done a job of the league. He was just effective. Ramazani, I thought he signed for Almeria for 20 million, but I could be wrong on that one. Joe Rodon had been there the previous year, and Isaac Schmidt didn't really do much last season. But overall, that was a good window for Leeds. And it's now got them in an even playing field where they can now go and spend that 100, 125, 150, I think they've placed to spend on the team to try and stay up, because in the last few seasons in the Premiership, the teams who have got promoted haven't been able to stay up because they've not spent money properly, or the level's just too high for them. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of season Leeds have. But the thing I'm kind of on the fence about is there's been no signings for either club so far. So I'm wary of that. I'm keeping an eye on it. I know it's still very early on in the window, but that's what I would say, Doug. I would say last season's Leeds transfer model was excellent, and it's something we should be aiming for down the line. We need to get to a level where we can win the league first and produce better talents to turn a profit, if that's what they're wanting.
Absolutely, I think it's been interesting seeing the kind of numbers that are coming through for some of the players. Obviously we've had a lot of talk about Raskin, but if you look at Cyril Dessers as a player that a lot of folk are looking to see go out the door, he's actually potentially looking like he's going out for a even better fee than I thought we were going to be getting, potentially even for a profit, which would be fantastic business. And I think at this point where we are in our rebuild right now, and like you say, maybe not focusing on the transfer model quite in terms of profit, but if you get a good value for someone like Cyril Dessers, you can just use that money for a straight swap out. So like Dessers is out, we use that money to bring in his replacement. Whereas with your Raskin, if you're getting your 15 to 20 million for that, that's what you then potentially use to bring in 3-4 players at once. So it'll be interesting to see how that all pans out.
Well, see, to be honest with you, sorry, just to nip in there. See, to be honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me looking at Rangers when the transfer window's closed if we've spent just around about £2-3 million, because I would expect anything we get from the transfer market. 49ers have come in, cleared the losses. So anything we make from the transfer market now will probably go back into the squad. I would imagine that's how they'll operate. I could be wrong, but it's just knowing what I know of them about Leeds, I would hazard a guess to say that any money that comes in will go right back into the squad, and you'll probably see transfers similar to this.
Absolutely. Okay, so the last thing that we've got for the last few minutes here is just looking at what could be some of the combinations that we see in terms of combined resources or combined strategies between the clubs. I've kind of split these into things that I think are very likely, and then less likely to happen, given what we talked about earlier on in terms of this isn't a multi-club model. They are still separate entities. So the level of combination, I think, will be more kind of background. Tam, if I come to you first on the things that are kind of very likely, this is what we touched on before about the shared databases, combining analytical data, and potentially, you've got one scout is going out to an area that is of use to both clubs, so he can look for both clubs, and so you're kind of pulling double duty there. You get to expand your coverage. Is there anything, since we sort of touched on it at the beginning, that you think we can really leverage in that area? Is that something that you are excited by in terms of the sort of the stuff that you touched on before?
Or
to use Billy's phrase, I'm not excited, but you think we can get benefit from?
We probably can get benefit. I'll be honest, I'm not excited about anything about Rangers now. I will be once we start winning games in the park. but I think that if we can go to areas, sending a scout to an area that will be beneficial for both clubs. I want to tap into markets that we haven't tapped into yet, because Billy said earlier on about the academies and stuff. I think we should maybe stop looking at Scottish academies, because unfortunately there isn't anywhere for young ones to play just now. When I was a little bit younger, I was on the books with St Mum, and we didn't have any league to play in. There was no scouts around at all. So we're not going to get a new generation of Scottish players in. So I think if we can go to a league like Japan, maybe Australia, maybe even tap back into the Moroccan sort of market where we got Igaman from, because there'll be there'll be players down there that will be beneficial for both clubs, because both clubs play different styles of football. So we could find a player that will work amazingly for us, and we could find a player that will work for Leeds, and then we give them the data.
Absolutely, I think that's the type of thing I think you can bring in benefit to both there, and I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. Billy, if I come to you on them, I'm going to skip the likely ones. We kind of touched on some of that earlier as well. So I want to get your idea or get your thoughts on the kind of the less likely ones, the ones I feel are less likely because of the brand separation. I think they'll probably will retain, but nonetheless, these are things that they could do that could be successful. So things like the first one I think is maybe the most likely of them in terms of behind the scenes again, where I think they'll well leverage more things. You could have a sponsor that ends up being similar across the clubs. And I think you can really bump the value of a deal if you're able to say to a sponsor, right, we can get you in front of the Premier League audience, but we can also put you in front of the Champions League audience with Rangers, and you can be in front of the Premier League audience with Leeds. That's something I think is maybe could have included in the more likely section, because that's something that doesn't necessarily need to have a public connection, but will just kind of end up happening because they can, as I say, in the background, they can be going to these sponsors and going, look, we can do you a double package here, and get you, a broader spread in terms of the advertising that you're looking to get from the clubs.
I mean, in theory, I wouldn't claim to be an expert on the kind of deals that would be getting put together, but there would also, I think, there'd be a wee bit of a minefield there, because commercial deals down south tied into the EPL, that these things will be subject to certain regulations. They'll be watertight. We saw the whole nonsense that happened when we didn't want to partake in the Cinch deal, for example, and the SPFL didn't follow their own rules because Neil Doncaster. And so I could see it being quite tricky, because you're talking about two different leagues, you're talking about two different markets. The EPL is guaranteed coverage around the world. Champions League we have to qualify for. You're then talking about, hitting an English market versus hitting Champions League, through a Scottish club. So I can see what you're saying, Doug. I think it's possible, but I think it might not. It might be quite tricky. Given that you'd be looking for sponsorship deals in two different leagues, in different competitions, where you're looking at different markets, I think someone smarter than me on the marketing side would need to come up with something that sort of straddles both of those. I do like I have to say that among the less likely stuff, that the joint merchandise stuff, just half and half scarves, and melt my brain. So I don't know that I see much of that. I mean, you might get something around the edges. Same with the combined tourism, and it's it's going to be a very limited number of people that want to visit Glasgow and Leeds. With the best will in the world, I love Glasgow, but if you're planning a sexy holiday, Leeds and Glasgow probably wouldn't be your two destinations. So on the other stuff, I I would fall into sort of Tam's category of not very excited about anything on the joint merchandising sales because, like, I've seen half and half scarves and they're a great idea, and then you see them in the shop and you go, who's wearing that? So, but on your main point, maybe like these are smart guys. If there's a way of coming up with a commercial deal that straddles the EPL, the SPFL, the Champions League, they'll be able to do it. But I could see that being quite tricky.
I mean, in my mind, the simplest form is just you've got someone in the door talking to you about Leeds and about doing this, and you just go, oh, by the way, we've got this club in the Champions League, and do you want to do something with them? They can be totally separate. It's just one opens the door to the other and vice versa.
Potentially,
yeah. I wish I'd written it down because I forgot, but there's a stat about the 49ers in terms of something, it's in the upper region, 75-80% of San Francisco 49ers have yet to select a British football club to follow. And so that's where I think maybe a bit of joint branding could come into play, get Leeds and Rangers in front and go, look, these are your teams, pick them up now, support them. They're doing great stuff.
I mean, potentially what I would say there is 100% of this Rangers fan hasn't selected an NFL team because I really don't care. so I mean, again...
Well, you got one by default. Okay, well, that takes us yeah?
If we start selling half and half scarves, I'll never buy another bit of merchandise. I am so far against that. It is wrong. In the words of Sean Dyche, utter woke nonsense.
We'll make sure to feed that back to them. So that takes us on to the hour just nicely there. So as I say, we hope we've managed to whet some folks' appetites on the type of things that we might see coming to Rangers. I think the picture in general, looking at how the 49ers have approached Leeds and the kind of stuff that they've done, gives a fairly positive picture of what might come for us. I'm fairly comfortable looking at what they've done there as to what we might see coming here, and I do think we are certainly looking at the brighter lights and brighter days that we've been wanting so badly of late. Just leaves me to thank everyone who's been watching, and in the comments, loads of great chat as always. Scotty, thanks for joining us this evening. Any last words before we go?
Oh, thanks for having me, guys. Doug, thanks for filling in. I had a Virgin Media engineer a couple of weeks ago because I had a apparent problem with my Wi-Fi, and he gave me a better modem, and I've had problems since. I don't know what's going on with it, so I'm going to go on the phone to them. Everybody head on over and check out our Tactics pod. Our Tactics department has been hard on looking at Russell Martin and getting a deep dive into how he plays. It's really, really good. Go and have a swatch at it. If you're watching on another platform, please head on over to our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. They've been sponsored by Off to the Match I Go. Head on over there, pick something up for Thursday. Scan a QR code, use a promo code Journal10, you'll get 10% off. And apart from that, we'll see you again.
And thank you, Billy.
Thanks. Looking forward to it. Bellsill, here I come. Decent bag of chips tomorrow.
And thank you again to Tam as well.
Thank you very much, mate.
Okay, so it just remains me to say thanks for myself. Again, thank you to everyone watching. And just a reminder that every night is a Rangers Journal night. Good evening.